Hello there guys, what is going on? Son of Chelsea back here again for another video. Or if you listen to this on the audio podcast, that'll be good as well. But every day feels like a bit of a challenge at the moment with football content and knowing what to talk about. But as you've seen on my channel, we're going to keep on talking about Chelsea because there is so much to talk about with our football club. And what I've liked to do this season is bring on guests to the channel to discuss Chelsea. And it's exactly what I'm going to keep doing. And we've got a new guest on today. You probably know this guy. He's probably one of the most well-known faces in the Chelsea online community from way back. And he's been a close friend of mine for many years now. Go back to 100% Chelsea days, if you remember them. So I wanted to bring him onto the channel to not only speak about current events, but Chelsea, how we've been doing under Frank Lampard and the future as well. Louis Beneventi. Louis, thank you for coming on. Welcome to the channel. How you doing, mate?
Thank you very, very much for having me, mate. I'm doing okay, I guess. I think based on current events, I think that's pretty much the answer that people can give. Surviving is usually the term that I like to use, but that's actually a term which people are using now. So I won't just say I'm surviving. I'm doing okay. I'm wealthy, so I'm very fortunate.
I saw you were doing quite well because I saw on TikTok yesterday you were stocking up on the essentials.
Yeah,
So
I
you've
was.
got
I
that.
was. I got the last toilet rolls in Sainsbury's, and I actually celebrated. Like people
Wow.
look at me like I'm a nutcase, but I'm like, you have not. I was literally halfway through my last roll, and I was kind of sat there going, how long can I make that last? The stupidest thing is though, right? So I had to. So before I got those toilet rolls, because I didn't know that they were going to be there. About a week ago, I ordered more. But the thing is, when I did the order, the only order I could do, which was financially made sense, was to order 48 toilet rolls because literally you could get 10 packs for like 30, 40 quid. I saw there was a 25 pack for 150 quid on Amazon. I was like, what the hell is this? Um, so it's literally, I found a site which does like subscription toilet rolls, and they've, I should be getting those, but because I didn't know when I was getting them.
Probably the only
Yeah, full
small
packs.
business that is currently benefiting off of this situation. There's probably some entrepreneur out there
Yeah.
who's been struggling for months and then suddenly his business becomes the most important. I mean, I don't understand this whole toilet roll sensation, but I'm glad you have got the last one. That's the most important thing.
Oh, no, to be fair, the only reason this toilet roll thing's happening is because of Australia. Because obviously, the thing with Australia is all of their toilet rolls are produced in China. So obviously, in China, they had the obviously where the outbreak started. All the Australians started going mad. That then went all over the internet, and then because people are very ill-informed and just take Twitter as gospel, it kind of spiraled from there, really, didn't it? And then social media kind of put it out there, and then everybody started buying loads and loads of toilet rolls. So yeah, it's one of those where it's like, ugh, I don't know. But I've got 4 bog rolls now, so I'm sorted.
Well, let's smoothly transition on from toilet rolls to the Euros. I think a smooth transition that we can make right here. Because as of the time of recording, the Euros has been suspended. It's going to be moved to 2021. I think a lot of people predicted that was going to happen. And now UEFA want the domestic leagues, the European domestic leagues, to be finished by June. Of course, a lot of that is depending on the problem, which is what I'm going to call it now because of YouTube's demonetization. We're going to call it the problem.
I don't call it Colin.
Colin. Okay, let's call it Colin. So Colin is the big problem, and that's what we need to sort out. And the Premier League, I think it's interesting, isn't it? Because there's been a bit of debate about whether to make the season void or to finish it or to reward or award whoever is in the positions at the moment. I mean, what do you think is going to be, rather than just like what you would like to happen, what do you think is going to be the realistic outcome of this?
So I think what was it? The rule is I think if every team's paid, it's either 27, 28, or 29 games. If it's 75% completed, then that is the final standings. However, there are lots of teams on different scenarios. So if it was me, excuse me, if it was me, I would basically, as much as I would despise it, I'd give Liverpool the title and just say, right, they're running away with it anyway. There's the title. However, I would say no one gets relegated. No one, all the leagues up and down stay the same. Just go again at the beginning of the season in August and off we go. Probably not going to happen. I mean, that's me using logic there, but I think it's pretty safe to say that logic doesn't really come into the frame of thinking with a lot of footballing bodies, all government bodies. If you look at the current government right now, just closing pubs is the only thing that's going to make a difference in it. But yeah, I think that Yeah, if that was me and I was down, is that for me to make the decision? That's what I'd do. I think the fact that they've said, well, we just need to see if the leagues can finish in June, very unlikely. Let's be honest. If you look at how the coronavirus has operated, obviously look at China, look at Italy now. We're about 2 weeks behind Italy, behind with Colin. Sorry, with Colin. Um, so obviously with Colin, um, we're probably looking at about 2 months lockdown. We're now midway through March, probably going to be into the lockdown within by the end of March, meaning that would be April, May, and if they're looking at June to start kickstarting stuff, the tail end of May is going to be very telling as to what the situation for the country is. Based on how we've handled it in comparison to other countries, I can't see it just being a 2 month lockdown because other countries have straight away gone in and gone, right, Colin, we're going to deal with you right away. And we're now sat there going, okay, we'll deal with you in a little bit. Like, first, like, there was that meme that was going around from that old TV show saying, stage one, we don't do anything. Stage two, we could do something, but we're not going to. Stage three is, we could have done something, but it's too late now. It's like, that's how we're operating. It's literally, just stick the kettle on. But it's one of those where it's just so hard to tell what's going to happen right now, even from a creation perspective. I mean, I kind of had a plan, and you know I've had a plan because I mean you've been speaking for the past few months of what I was going to do over the next few months, how I wanted to develop some things I've been doing, and then literally this just hits and like that, it's redundant, nothing. I can't do anything. Um, so it's one of those where I'm going to have to try and figure out what I'm going to do. The Premier League's got to figure out what it's got to do. Everyone has got to figure out what it's got to do. Um, but it's a really tough time for everybody right now. So, fingers crossed, and we will come out the back end of it much stronger, and hopefully. But I mean, the Premier League's outcome it's down to them. I've got no idea what's going to happen.
Yeah, absolutely. They're having, I believe, a conference call on Thursday. So that'll be tomorrow. By the time this gets uploaded, when you're watching this, there'll be a conference call tomorrow, and hopefully we'll get some sort of clarity or news from there. But as Louis, you just said, it's about sort of waiting for stuff because it feels like a daily thing currently, the news. It's not, you can't just wait and then the news will be out in a couple of days. It's literally day by day at the moment. That's probably the most sensible thing. But let's get into Chelsea because I'm not going to say the only positive because it feels sort of a bad thing to say currently. But if we, I guess the thing for fans currently to talk about is Chelsea and maybe having a little bit more reflection on the season because there is going to be this break, whether it starts again or not. We can look back maybe a bit at the season we've had and analyse it. It ended, or at least when we stopped play, we ended pretty well with two of our best performances. Chelsea this season, how do you think it's gone in comparison to pre-season predictions and expectations? Judgment on Frank Lampard, how you think he's coped, some of the players, system, formation. Just give me sort of a wider sort of scale analysis on Chelsea so far.
I mean, for me, it's not really. I didn't really go in with any expectations because I didn't think that would be fair. Look, you had a transfer ban. We just lost our best player. Had a young manager coming in. What you could tell was going to be a brand new start. For me, the season was a case of look, wherever we finish, that's the benchmark. That's where we build from. That was the healthiest way to look at it. Obviously, there are times that I was disappointed, times that I was annoyed. I mean, I think that Sheffield United game, we were leading, we lost the lead. West Ham at home, Bournemouth at home, Southampton at home. Southampton at home, maybe not so much in hindsight because they did go on a great run afterwards. Um, there have been times this season where I felt performances have lacked. However, from a benchmark perspective, you can kind of ascertain what players are like now and have a rough feeling going into a transfer market what we need. I think this season we just about finding the right formula that we had. I think Frank found that formula. No doubt there are still a lot of things that need to be ironed out. I think if you look at the left back slot, I feel that's one. Fullback maybe in general, midfield, striker. We definitely need another winger. There's a lot that needs to be done. I think the goalkeeper situation was, I think it's a not a big fuss about nothing because I feel that Kepa was not performing as well as he can do. But look, he is a young goalkeeper, and people were just saying, let's just replace him with another young goalkeeper, which caused the same problem. who is developing, 9-year contract, a lot of faith shown in him. So it's one of those where, look, if it doesn't work again next year, that's when we need to look at something different. But more importantly, right now, Tammy Abraham, I feel, he's got great competition now. Giroud came into his own towards the back end of what is the current season, but it might be the end of the season. Marcus Alonso was playing really well. There's people are fighting for their places, but there's no doubt that Frank Lampard's been able to look at a lot of the youth players and go, right, you're good enough, you're not good enough, you're good enough, you're not good enough. And from that, we can kind of go and get the players to compete in those main places to push forward. Obviously, with a transfer ban as well, we can spend a lot more money. So I think we've had 2 transfer windows build up. Hakeem Ziyech still to come in as well. So there's a lot to look forward to. But this season for me, I didn't have any expectations. I wasn't going to lose my nut. I feel that is a big problem with a lot of fan media, is very sensationalist. I'd say there's within the Chelsea community, I wouldn't say that as much. I feel like we were a lot more measured. But I feel like if you go on football Twitter or you go on YouTube, and some people just losing their minds, you just sit there going, oh, okay, right, well, I don't agree with that. And if you try and have a rational conversation, you get called a nonce or something like that. It's just something where it's like you can't have a rational discussion. So for me, I've kind of kept myself to myself and gone, you know what, I'm just gonna see what happens here. And to be fair, if anyone said to me you'd be in the round of 16 of the Champions League, you'd be in the chase for top 4 comfortably. You'd have an English centre forward, one of the youth products, who's actually been scoring a lot of goals this season. Maybe not as dried up towards the back end, but still up there for one of the top goal scorers. You're going to have a really good record away from home. Home record has been poor. Apparently, in the Premier League, we've only done 1 game a month. That's relegation. So stuff like that. Where there's the stuff that needs to be worked on. But look, the platform is there. We need to just analyse it for what it is. Take it at face value. Don't read it. Let's go, right, this is what we've got. I'd say left back, striker, probably the 2 priority targets right now, or a winger. One of those 3. But that's big. That's what I've taken from this season anyway.
Agree with everything you've said there. I think that Chelsea, looking back at pre-season and my expectation, I think I said 5th in one of my videos, and I was believing we were going to be in a fight with Spurs, United and Arsenal. Of course, all 3 of those teams have underperformed from where we believed they were going to be in pre-season. I think mostly probably Arsenal, and especially Spurs as well. I mean, that's a crazy situation as well. But I think just looking at Chelsea and Lampard, I think you have to, as you said, whenever there's been a poor result, I think you always have to go back to this mode of looking wider and looking at what were your pre-season expectations? What is Frank Lampard up against? The injury list, I think, is a thing I've been speaking about recently, about the amount of injuries he's had this year to contend with has been ridiculous. I mean, 7 first-team players out either through injury or suspension for the Everton game. I think a lot of us walked into that game thinking this is going to be a real struggle, and it turned out to be one of our best performances of the season. And I think there is a style of play there with Lampard that has been lacking over the winter months, maybe through fatigue or struggles, that was there during our best winning run of the season. And you got to remember, with those big players, the likes of Christian Pulisic, who's one of our best performers pre-Christmas, who's been injured recently. These players coming back in, Ziyech coming in, all these players, and potentially a left back. I do believe left back and a striker are 2 key areas that we need to bulk up on. I was speaking about Dembele yesterday and Telles, whoever that is. I think those are the two key areas. But I do think there's a lot to be positive about and a lot for Lampard to build on. But I do believe Champions League football probably will determine the feeling about the season in general, especially because Chelsea are in such a promising position to get that now. You hope that will play out if the season resumes. But looking longer term for Frank Lampard and what's going to happen, it's a big question. Do you think Frank Lampard can win a Premier League title with Chelsea as a coach?
Not in the next few years, no. But I'd say that's down to the fact that the competition around us is so much stronger for that top position. But that's mainly because they've had the structure in place and they've taken the time to build it. If people are automatically going to expect silverware next season just because Frank Lampard's had that one season to settle in, forget it. I take Liverpool, and like I said, I despise that club with a burning passion. I hate it. Um, I take them as the prime example of how to run a football club right now. You look at how they invest their finances. You look at how good the structure is. You know, they've kind of almost lifted that blueprint from the 1980s of that massive successful period for Liverpool, moved it across to the 2010s and 20s, and gone, right, we now got Jurgen Klopp as a manager. We now have a clear style of play. We now have a clear structure. We now have a clear transfer transfer strategy, sorry, just a clear way of how to run the club. Chelsea and the way we've run over the past 20 years has been, right, you're not doing well, get lost. You're not doing well, get lost. And it's worked, don't get me wrong. Wouldn't change the trophies for the world. But football has moved on from that. And if you look at managers and clubs which have the most success, look at Liverpool, like I said, look at Man City. Even though they were chopping and changing with managers as well, they were building a structure because they were going, Pep Guardiola will be our manager one day. We'll build for him. We've now got a manager who has offered a clear route for youth players, of which Chelsea, for the past few years, and I don't care what anybody says, Chelsea have had the best youth system on the planet. The difficulty has just been that final step from the under 21s and 20s and 23s through to the first team. But you find me a club where that's not the same. Chelsea have just completely capitulated there until Frank Lampard's come in. We've now got that strategy there where you kind of got that tunnel to bring in quality from the youth, but you then also need to be bringing quality in from elsewhere. It's finding that balance, and that's what next season is going to be about, because the problem that he's going to face this year, he's been able to just bring in youth players, everyone who understands the club, it's all hunky-dory, fantastic. There will be players that come in from other clubs. Obviously, we've already mentioned Alex Telles as a potential target. People have talked about Jadon Sancho as another target. And other players as well. Hakim Ziyech is coming in. Out of these three there, I think the biggest thing that Frank Lampard has to consider is not just the raw talent that's available, but you have to consider the social aspect. And I think that's what a lot of people overlook because they're playing FIFA or Football Manager when it comes to making signings. Jadon Sancho for me, or Ben Chilwell, the reason I mention these guys is because, one, they're English. This isn't me being very Brexity. Can you imagine with a name like mine being very Brexity for a start? It's a case of, from a social aspect, they already know Tammy Abraham, Callum Hudson-Odoi, Reece James, Tamori. These are all guys which hang out together with each other when they're on England duty. They're all mates. They all know each other. Jadon Sancho grew up with Tammy Abraham and Callum Hudson-Odoi, really good friends. So this is a case of you be investing in a young player. No doubt right now he's one of the best in the world and probably the best league from a footballing perspective right now as well, who would be coming into our setup. Hopefully, fingers crossed, if it does happen, that's who I'd like. That's my first choice target, which is another issue with Chelsea. Like I was saying, with transfer strategy, we have a tendency over the past few years, if we have to list of 5 targets, we always go for the one in the middle. We never go for our top choice. Now we have the money and we have the time, we've had the investment because of 3 windows where we're not going to spend money, or 2 or 3 windows. Literally, we've just got to now go, right, top target. We have the finances to do it. We have, from a financial fair play perspective, the ability to do it. Marine has done some fantastic business already with Hakim Ziyech. I think that's a great deal, depending on how he does, because obviously there are players that do come in from the Dutch league who absolutely kill it, and others, like Vincent Janssen, who absolutely flop. Or Luke de Jong is another example. So it's one of those where, look, we just have to take the rough with this move and see what happens. But I'd say go for those top targets, and making those investments is the key things, because I'd rather spend up 200 million on 3 really good players than 200 million on 4 or 5 average players. And we have a lot of dead wood in the squad, which we need to consider clearing out. But look, it's all about how Chelsea handle that strategy going forward if we want to win a Premier League. But I think patience is the key thing here. As long as there is progression over the next few years under Frank Lampard, I don't see why not. If it hits 5-6 years and we're not progressing, we've hit a standstill, that's when you probably need to start looking at it. But I think, look, 3-4, you're probably going to be looking at progression. I'd say as long as we're getting up there by that 3rd or 4th season where we're running them close, maybe, then that's fine by me. But I think we just need to take the rough with the smooth.
I think that is the sort of utopian sort of vision with Lampard, isn't it? And that's the big question. I mean, it was the big question under Sarri, which we got. I don't want to go back through that argument, but I think that Sarri, I think, was a very sort of telling time for me with Chelsea and the win now mentality. I think that was very much like the last sort of like, I think his reign will be seen, I think, in years to come as like the last time where you could see that sort of mentality faltering. It's no longer just sack a manager, bring another one in, and it's going to fix. Because domestically, we've been in a battle for Champions League qualification for the last 3 years. Like, this is not, it's not rare anymore. This is not we're not challenging for Premier League titles like we used to, and that to get back to that, it's going to require something different. I think it's a variety of things you just mentioned there. I think firstly, I think it's certainty of Frank Lampard of what is his best formation. He talks a lot about flexibility, which I like. I don't believe it's something that should be just discarded, but I do believe in the modern game. I do believe at least, I think you do need to have a plan A. I think you need to have a set. I think the modern player likes clarity, and it's why I think Jose's struggling, because the pragmatic vision of before of reactive football doesn't work as well anymore. I think a Simeone can still do it, but it's a very rare thing to, especially with modern players and players who want to play attacking football. Chelsea's squad, I think the Bayern game, not only was the Bayern game a great demonstration of where we have fallen in terms of European competition, but also trying to play a defensive style of football with Jorginho and Kovacic just doesn't work, because we don't have players like that anymore. They are players that are so focused on ball retention and players that are used to attacking. It just doesn't work like it used to when we had players like Matic and Mikel, when those were players that were used to playing that style of football.
Lord Mikel, mate.
Lord Mikel, African Zidane. I think that's the difference there. And you say about recruitment, I think it's actually for me a mixture of big names but also smart recruitment. What I like 100%. About Ziyech is not so much about, like, he's not an unknown quantity. Chelsea fans know who he is because he played so well against us. But he, with the price tag and considering, Wilfried Zaha, how much he would have cost, I think I like when Chelsea go in for players that potentially, at first, some people may go, like, he's not the obvious name. But Liverpool have done that. There's a mixture in that squad with Klopp of obvious big signings like a Van Dijk and an Alisson that were needed to fill big areas and big holes in his squad that have and elevated that team massively. But also you've got the smart recruitment of Andy Robertson, of a Gini Wijnaldum, that are players that showed potential before but have been elevated by Klopp's system. Now that's very much, can Lampard create a system that elevates players and takes players that are sort of, you'd say maybe some other clubs can look quite average and turn them into world beaters. That's a key component. That it's a massive question, isn't it? So I think a lot of things sort of have to come in, and I do believe unity and certainty. I say it a lot. I think it is a word that needs to be used because we've lacked a bit of that this season. But but we knew that bringing in a manager only in his second year as a coach. I mean, you had to expect there were going to be growing pains, and there still is. But I do believe. And I do agree with you when you say about recruitment. I think it is absolutely vital for Chelsea. And I would say, based on the last few signings we've made, I do believe we are going in a better direction. I think if you look at, Kepa, Jorginho, Kovacic, Pulisic, and now Ziyech, I think all of those players, yes, there's question marks over Kepa, and there's probably question marks over the long-term future of Jorginho. But I'd say all of those signings there, especially the outfield players, I think have helped Chelsea and improved Chelsea and or at least profiles of players that are going to take Chelsea in a more positive direction.
Yeah, I'd agree with that. However, I feel at the same time they are some of the price tags. They are players which you probably could have looked at investing more heavily in a big name. I feel we like you're saying with Liverpool, they've found those small signings, not small signings, but the small financial value signings in good players. But for the same token, we just mentioned Alisson and Van Dijk. 2-3 years ago, if we'd have gone for a Koulibaly and actually put our money where our mouth is, I don't think we'd be in the defensive situation we're in. There's no point doing it now. Guy's 29. So now it's a case of you've got to go, right, what's the next big name? What's the guy which you could bring in at centre-back, which is something maybe worth considering to do something there. Left-back, if you want to, people are going 80 million for Ben Chilwell, probably not right now, not had the best of form, but, he's a guy which, whenever I've seen him play, personally, I've been a massive fan. You're guaranteed consistency there. You're guaranteed someone who could be there for a sustainable amount of time, and it's money well spent if it's invested correctly. But you need to make those big signings now because I feel we've got the patter. You've got the the nice sort of, oh, he's nice, good value there. Well done, that's solid, brilliant, fantastic. You'll now need to be looking at it going, right, bring him in because he's someone who can make a definite difference straight away. But again, like I said, making sure the balance is correct as well. I think the difference between Klopp and Lampard, where you're talking about unity and everything and getting the best out of players and turning them into world beaters, Jurgen Klopp's done that because he's done it at 3 different clubs. He's got the experience behind him now, and he had the right staff behind him at Dortmund, for example, and at Liverpool to make sure that gets done. Chelsea still, I don't think, have a decent head of scouting, because obviously we got rid of someone who brought in some really dodgy players. If I'm honest, I feel that's something that's definitely needs to be looked at. I've got a director of football still.
Yeah, that's still. I mean, there was, because Petr Cech is the technical advisor, but I feel like I've butchered his name, but that was his job title that was given, and we still. I mean, Michael Ballack's been talked about before, because of course he's such a big fan of Chelsea still, and was always talking about the club. But that feels like a dream sort of scenario, isn't it? Bringing players back, but I do agree with you. I think that is an area Chelsea need to improve on. I think that's important, and it surprised me Chelsea still haven't filled that role. To me, that's a bit confusing, because I did think when Emerlo left and they said they were going to look for a replacement, they still haven't. I do believe that link is so important now in the modern game, isn't it? So we probably a little bit harsh on Emerlo in truth, because when he left, was he still here when that summer of 2017? Was he still here for that transfer window, or had he left already?
That was final window.
That was his final window.
Because I remember I was at uni when he left. I remember that was my second year. So it was just the big September-ish tail end of 2017 that he left. But I think if that role is not being filled, and Lampard, this is the thing that annoys me the most about football. You've got the manager and head coach. They're 2 very different job titles, despite it being pretty much the same role. If Frank Lampard is the head coach and you've got the technical advisor in check, you need to have a director of football in there, so Lampard can say what he wants. These 2 can talk, get the head of scouting, bang, bang, boom, go to Marina, get the deal done. That's what it needs to be. If it's a case of Lampard's going to Marina, because obviously as an ex-player and someone with a bit of sway within the club, he's doing that, and the same is happening with Cech. Look, you need to talk about the job titles. And as much as it sounds something that's very primitive and just boring and unnecessary for it to even be saying, just from a business perspective, it's something that needs to be considered, because it's one of those where I don't think that if it's going to be something which is messed around with, you need to sort it out and have that clarity. This is what I'm talking about in terms of having that long-term vision, having that plan, and making sure you have that structure. Get the structure clean, and then talk about signing those big names and then getting everything sorted. It's a mess. But again, like I said, that's what the season was about: learning where the problems were lying and addressing them as soon as was physically possible and made sense to do so, rather than panic and just get in some random technical director or some random director of performance or whatever it is, or random footballing director. Or, it's one of those where it's like you see clubs like that have done that in the past, and it's gone with egg on their face. I think a director of football is needed, unless that is Petr Cech's role, and it's just not been described very well.
Yeah, I think as well the director of football is important for, as much as we want to back Frank, I think it is important, and I think we saw this with Antonio Conte, and I know we'll probably disagree about Antonio Conte, but I think it's important to have that person for the well-being of the long-term future of the club. The director of football, I know the director of football, like Emenalo, was painted as the villain, but when you actually see it, it's, in a lot of ways, it's thinking long-term about the club's recruitment just past that manager's tenure. If Conte wants to bring in a 28, 29-year-old for a high fee, Emenalo probably sits there and goes, well, hang on here, you're bringing in this player, you could be out the door pretty soon, because we have this problem with you at the moment. And if you leave in the summer, we're stuck with this player that hasn't got a good resale value to him, that we've just spent a lot on for a very short period of time. Is that business business savvy to do at this time to bring in this player? So it's not only helping and having that connection between the head coach and the board, it's also for that director of football to sort of look longer term for the club and look out for the club's future. Maybe, as Emanalo said in quotes recently, I remember covering it on my channel, he talked about the academy and fighting for the academy and wanting to keep it, saying how important it was to keep it open. Apparently he had a fight with a conflict with a former Chelsea manager who was unnamed about keeping the academy open. We don't know who that coach is, but I think that was a telling sign of how key that role can be. Well, I think we all assumed that. I mean, I didn't want to assume that because it might not have been him. It might have been someone. That's the obvious one, right? I think I said it in my video. I said that's the obvious name that you'd come out with because, of course, it would be him. But at the same time, I don't want to assume that because it could be a name we haven't thought of. And just whatever it is, I think what's more important in that story, rather than who the coach is, I think it's more important that Emanalo fought for the academy and said it's vital. And that's what a director of football can also do, is fight for the future and the next generation of players. But it's going to be interesting. I think that is something that definitely needs to be resolved. I do believe Chelsea are going to be serious in the window. At least that's what I believe. I think the fact that we went so emphatically and got Ziyech so quickly, I think is a really positive sign that encourages me that Chelsea are going to act more swiftly than they have previously, hopefully. I guess just talking about Chelsea and the season so far, we talked about it at the start. Who's been sort of your player of the season? Who do you think has impressed you the most? I know it's a big question, and if the season doesn't get declared void and we do finish it, of course, those ending to the season could be absolutely huge in who gets that, because a player who comes in at the end of this, like Giroud, could turn out to be player of the season because his goals could win us the FA Cup and get us Champions League football. But just based on what you've seen, what all we have the evidence on based now, who would you say has been your player of the season so far for Chelsea?
I would say Mateo Kovacic. Based on re-signing him permanently at the end of last season, based on the performances he was having under Sarri, I was not convinced at all. He's come into a league of his own this year. Same with Jorginho, again, another player who's come into. It's like the shackles were taken off. We saw a guy who was actually moving players about where he wanted them, rather than just following Sarri and saying what he was doing. He was moving them and spraying passes and actually proving what was, quite frankly, an idiotic statement of the guy can only make short passes wrong just for a system. For me, player of the season, Mateo Kovacic, Mason Mount, Tammy Abraham, two players which have come in and stepped up a gear. Yeah, they've dried up towards the back end of this season. Can you blame them? I think they're the same age as you and I, Dan. Maybe younger as well. They are, and I get that they're professional athletes, but at the same time, you can kind of see what the negative impacts of continuous football over Christmas is on players and young players as well. Still technically developing, both biologically and from a footballing perspective. I think people always raise Wayne Rooney as an example of a player who was, way beyond his years. Someone who, if he can do it, anyone can. Wayne Rooney was an anomaly in a sea of young players.
It's the same with Mbappe. It's the same with Mbappe. Yeah. It's the same with Haaland right now. I don't know if you saw, I made a video months back about Callum Hudson-ODOI, and I said, and this can be applied to basically every young player. I think Mbappe was like what Rooney was. I think it is a freak situation, and I think it actually hurts younger players in other situations, because then fans of top clubs turn around and go, well, why can't you? I think Rashford has had this problem recently as well. It's like, why can't you be like Mbappe? And it's like, you have to realise Mbappe and Haaland are like ridiculous outliers. They are not the sort of the expected sort of development of a young player. And just because a player isn't banging in goals instantly and is being Harry Kane is the prime example of this. If I wanted to give you a situation right now, like Tammy Abraham is doing better, I think, or doing better, or is getting close to. I'd like to see stats. I'm not sure quite when Harry Kane broke in at Spurs. It may have been the same age, but Harry Kane, I think most people would have expected, based on his struggles earlier in his career, wouldn't have broke through. So sorry to interrupt. It's just, I think that's a key point to make.
It is. It's a massively viable point. And I think this is the thing. I think being able to take a step away from football content creation for a large part of the seasons actually helped me a lot. Especially when when I've been stepping away, I've been running a football club, and I'm not saying I've run it to the same level, but it's the man management, it's all the little bits and bobs which you don't see on a football pitch, as a fan that you can kind of take. Obviously, it's not the same. I'm not going to say it is, but you can kind of take different bits and bobs and almost try and piece something together. Um, but it's these young players are like, I think this new generation of talent. If you compare it to Wayne Rooney, Michael Owen, young Alan Shearer, you can't, because these were lads that were cleaning older players' boots. Were apprentices at the football clubs, came to the academy and were fighting for it, rather than being aged 15, 16, having an agent wrapping you in cotton wool and earning 100 grand a year, or 100 grand a year, that'd be nice, 100 grand a week. You know what I mean? It's one of those where it's like, these are lads which are a completely different type of player. So it's really not comparable. So, and you can tell from a human perspective, a psychological perspective, they come out of their shells more when they have, an arm put around them and have that entourage or whatever. But that's because of how they've become. That's modern football. That's what we can have to take with it. So, we look at these players and hopefully, they can kick on. Yeah, in terms of people, I think the whole team for me has been okay. I think we've done solid in parts. I'd say in other parts we've not been great. I mean, there is a lot of dead wood in the squad, but in terms of people that have performed well, I think Kovacic is the standout player for Player of the Year. I think there's been a few surprise packages in terms of negative stuff, in terms of, for example, N'Golo Kante and his regular injuries. That's been quite a slowing down. You can see, and that's evident. There's stuff which needs to be addressed. But look, I think this season, like I said right at the beginning, rough with the smooth, see what happens, see how it develops.
Definitely. I think that sums it up really well. And well, thank you for coming on, mate, to the channel, Louis. It's been a good discussion. Of course, it's really unpredictable to know what's going to happen next and how long the suspension is going to last, but we'll have to see, and hopefully football will be back sooner rather than later. Before we wrap up, just give you the chance, Louis, to shout out where people can find your content online. Where's the best place to find your work? Because I know you've been stepping away recently, but I know around the January transfer window, you did put more content on your own YouTube channel. I don't know if that's going to be restarted. So, and of course, Chelsea Echo. So just a chance for you to plug everything you're working on at the moment.
Yeah, so at the minute, like you said, Chelsea Echo, something I've been working on since October, really. Working on it with Dan, actually. So make sure you see Dan's articles, and no doubt he'll be coming on and doing bits and bobs whenever he can. Obviously, my personal channel as well. I'm doing stuff there, Imperial Wharf. Basically, I've turned into Del Boy over the past 6 months and put as many fingers in as many pies as possible. Yes, I know, fat jokes are incoming. But outside of that, that's kind of what I've been doing, and it's where you can find me. Obviously, follow me on my Twitter, Louis_Beneventi. Just hit 10,000 followers as well. Big thank you to that man on your screen, by the way, for helping me out with that, and obviously being there since the beginning. But yeah, I mean, that's where you can find me. I'm sure Dan will be leaving all that stuff in the description. But yeah, exciting times.
Yeah, definitely. Links will be in the description box below. So definitely go and check out everything Louis just promoted there. Give some support, especially during these times for content creators of football, because it is a bit of a challenging time. And creating stuff and creating content whilst there's no football on is a bit of a challenge. But all the support you can give is really much appreciated. But thank you guys so much for taking the time to watch this video. If you did enjoy it, hit that subscribe button and the notification bell to never miss an upload. Follow me on Twitter @SonOfChelsea, and I'll see you again.